later. But we treat them as batches that come in, and they generally will stay in that area, you know, and you do find birds migrating and ending up somewhere else. But it's quite funny, you actually quite often have nest pairs, you know.
And you'll see them come from a race together quite often, don't you?
And those
or within
birds,
seconds.
right from the beginning to the end, they end up together, you know.
Is there any advantage with the sun on the left, right, centre?
Not really, you know, because we're in the tropics.
When you look at your...
You know, if you look at it, the loft is positioned in such a way that the sun is mostly overhead. It rises in the east and sets in the west overhead. You know, in winter it's a little bit elevated, but it's not like, because we're in the tropics, not like outside of the tropics and you've got to face the birds to where the sun is. You know, we've had comments on people that are right outside of the tropics saying, well, I'd never send a pigeon to your loft because it's they're positioned incorrectly. Maybe it's incorrect for Iceland.
Yeah, but not for here.
For here, you know, you want to keep the sun off the pigeons as much as possible. So that's what we do. We want them in the shade.
Do you find any specific parts of the loft over the years better than others, or?
Not really. I mean, when you look at the results after the final, see how many pigeons are in each section, and you'll find it's pretty evenly spread, you know. So that's it. This is a new section from here to, we've got a total of 57 sections. You know, all of them, they're identical. What we have here, if you have a look at the trap, in the front of every section is an electronic trap outside the passageway. But coming into the sections, we have one between two. So the birds will come in here and then they go through these doors underneath, and they will share the three sections between the one trap. Now, those traps have got double pads. We have two levels.
So if they miss on one, they catch on the other. Pad at the top.
So you've got a pad at the top, and you have another pad underneath.
So if one misses, the chances of it missing twice is very...
That's what we did originally, but it's no longer necessary because we now have a pad outside as well. So we now only have one pad outside and we have one pad inside. But prior to us putting that passageway, which is a new addition, we had two pads here, just in case one needed to be picked up. So that's what we have. So in front of every single section is a pad. So a bird can go directly into his section of preference. And this gives us the ability to manage the birds a lot better. You know, we've got doors outside in the passageway so that we can close sections off, let certain birds out. When we're breaking them in, of course, we can let certain sections out. And I'll show you the net arrangement that we have when we go outside.
Inside one of the sections, Victoria Falls, box perches, they feel the birds are more comfortable and have a place to call home.
When you have the birds in,
At the top of the range, we test the pigeons regularly, at least twice a week when we, just as a matter of course, but we are testing and looking for common pathogens like trichomoniasis, which is canker, coccidiosis, worms, and candida, and so on. And we've got technicians that are trained to do that, and they spend their life doing that. So, and they're really good. And I have a whole heap of photographs. As I see something, I take a picture. And we just monitor the levels of the challenge that we have, and if necessary, we'll treat for it. We have two mics because one goes, when they go to quarantine, they have mics as well to look and check on things. But we're actually moving more onto a more prophylactic type treatment program rather than reactive. Because you know, you can have thousands of pigeons and you take a sample of 10 or 20 birds and they look clean, but there will be birds, there could be birds that have got an infection Now, you quite easily miss it. And if you really want a good test, you need to do 200 pigeons. Now that just takes too much time. So what we do is we rather have a program that is we know how often we must do certain things, and we'll treat it more in a prophylactic type arrangement.
In such way.
And sorry?
By that you mean?
No, preventative.
Yeah.
So we're treating anyway. You know, we treat regardless of what we think, and as long as it's done regularly, and we rotate certain products and so on. We've had a huge challenge with trichomoniasis this year because the pathogens are totally resistant to the normal drugs, and it's universally found within Southern Africa. They've built up resistance and they're just not responding. And the molecular structure of most of your canker treatments is very similar. So you get a new product on the market, it's got a couple of extra molecules that is added in there to try and treat or overcome resistance. But if they've been getting the other product regularly, they've learned, or they've got resistant to that molecular structure. So it takes a while to break them and get them onto the new one, which is effective. But for how long is it effective? Because these things are changing all the time.
Yeah.
So the vets and the scientists have to try and keep ahead of it. We're the guinea pigs.
Like our vaccines, isn't it? You know, they're constantly tinkering COVID vaccines, etc.
Yeah. I mean, COVID is changing, it mutates all the time.
Yeah.
That's a virus.
Yeah.
But, it's the same sort of principle in
Yeah.
bacterial infection or pathogenic thing
Yeah.
that we have in canker. So, anyway, that's where things happen here. We have teams of people. Some people's job is to put baskets in front of the aperture there, and there's others that carry and load the truck. You saw how it happened during our basket. But they get pretty good at what they're doing. And as I say, we start 4 o'clock in the morning, and we basket because we don't really want the birds to spend overnight. And initially, there's more birds than I would like because of the numbers in a basket. But we now have 2 trucks. The one you saw, another one. Each will take 4,500, 5,000 each truck. But by the time you get down the road a bit, you normally your numbers will you see we get less pigeons. But if we have to, we have 2 vehicles to do it, and we have a 3rd vehicle as well, which will take 2,000 pigeons, which we're going to use in the initial stages when we're breaking the birds in. We need to just get them out and toss them 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers in each direction, just to get them orientated. But we do it in small batches of 2,000 pigeons. And that vehicle I can show you as we go across there. So anyway, that's the end of this, but I wanted to show you our net arrangement that takes place between the lofts and how we treat the birds as they come in and manage them. Okay, so you go in, you can clean it. So we don't clean it that often, probably 2 or 3 times during the season. We'll take everything out and we clean it.
How much distance between the floors and the ground there?
1.2 meters.
1.2 meters.
Very interesting, the netting there. That will diffuse besides keeping out vermin and everything, that will diffuse the wind and stop it.
Well, we've got these roll downs. So if you've got a lot of wind,
Yeah.
roll downs.
But that in itself will make it percolate rather than rush through. A lot of people have back home the loft raised off.
Notice that we have a passageway on either side of the loft, and you'll see that there are some gates in it, so we can actually keep birds that are here from going further down the passageway. But in addition to that, during the quarantine period, we put a divider in here, and that's a collapsible divider that just clips together, and it separates this part of the ground to that. And if you have a look at the rails at the top here, we have a net, like a tennis court net, and that is on winders, which we have at the end. I'll show it to you. So when we want to close the net Like as I said to you earlier, Wimbledon, you can open and close the roof. Well, we can open and close the nets here. So what happens is we've got the net will be concertinaed and kept at the end here, okay? And then when we pull it, we just pull it up and it comes to this divider, or to the next one, or to the next one. Depends on how many sections we're closing off. So we can individually open the sections or not. So when the birds come in from quarantine, it's a month-long program. After being released there, we'll settle them within a month. The first week, they need to settle down and they're a bit skittish and they all congregate in one corner and they start to spread out. And normally after about 5-6 days, they've settled. We then let them out of the loft into the passageway, and these are all closed. And they go in and out of the traps. And we feed them into the loft so they get to know that that's where they must go. After the end of the second week, we will then release them out. These doors will open, and we let them out under the net onto the sand. And the birds can fly up, go in and out as they like. So within 2 weeks, they must be fully affair with all that. After that, we now take the nets off in this section. But we've got 2 separate lots, so we can treat them one day at a time, and it's easy to open and close. So we can manage 6 separate groups of pigeons at a time by doing that. So that's the system that we have here, and it's taken a while to get it right. Last year we had these rails on the roof, and it was quite problematic because we'll try and close them and they would catch the gutters and so on. So I said, no, let's move it down. So now it's at this level rather than above the roof. So it's much easier now. And
do you ever find, Geoff, once they're all out together, do they stay in their same sections or do they swap about?
you know, if you bring an intake of pigeons and you put them in these sections here, that becomes their home.
So
They'll
they
come
don't
in and
bother
out and
going-
they'll home to the section. You will find an odd bird ends up somewhere else, but the
But in
vast
general,
majority of birds will stay in that section
Yeah, yeah.
and wherever. But they're at liberty to go where they like. But that's what we do. Now the exception to that is the trackers will go into the end sections there.
Yeah.
And what happens at the end of the season now, if we fly an Enduro series, which I'm pretty sure we will, the birds that are not selected for sale will go into the Enduro section. Goes into that area there, and it's above the net. The net will come and drop below the landing board there, so those birds can go in and out. Well, not in and out when they like, but when we let them out, they come in through the top, and they'll trap into those 4 traps at the top. And we will break them and we'll train them in there. Within, I would say, a week to 10 days, all the birds will be settled there, and they would love it. They like it because we, as I said to you when we're inside, I will put some nesting material down that they'll want to be in there. But then of course we clean it up after that, and then we
You
keep them
lot
too
of
busy
things.
to want to breed. So that's the whole system.
Very good.
What we do when the pigeons come from wherever they come into quarantine, they generally arrive late. You know, we get them even sometimes at night. It's difficult to manage them then, but we have to immediately try and stop any infection of paramyxovirus, which is the biggest challenge that we have. And so we spray them with a live vaccine. It's a Nobulus clone 30, and we find it very effective. We spray them so birds have got some kind of defense against any paramyxa if they weren't previously vaccinated. So that's on arrival. Then they get put into their lofts and kept as quiet as possible. We've got nets that close them off as well, and we'll go on to electrolytes for 2 days. Then the 3rd day we will go through the birds, we catch them, we record their numbers, we will give them an oil-based vaccine by injection, a subcutaneous injection, and then we'll do a few other things for those birds. We spray them for lice and all the rest of it. and then they go through a program. And that program is designed to treat things like salmonella. And funny enough, it's probably the biggest challenge that people have, and it's an unknown problem because people don't realize they have salmonella. But I'd say a large percentage of birds that come in do carry salmonella, or paratyphoid, that some people will call it. We don't vaccinate for it. Some people vaccinate before sending, but we treat for it, and we have some very, very effective treatments for it. And then we treat for coccidiasis, and we go through other things. They will get a pox vaccine, they get dewormed, over the course of the 3 weeks that we have them. And we give them a lot of probiotics and so on. And we also initially, when the birds come in, we actually grade them according to their health status. So you do get some birds that have taken a lot of strain, from traveling, and they're probably a little bit sick when they started, but we try and get, every bird matters to us. We've got to get them through if we can. But we try and give them the best possible chance. Stress is the biggest issue that you face. It's, a lot of pigeons can withstand a lot. This body defense will overcome any subclinical infection. But the moment you put them under stress, it weakens their system, and they become a full-blown infection. And we know that birds that are badly infected before they arrive, they normally die in the first week. That bird didn't get sick when it arrived. It's sick when it came. If your birds start getting sick later, it's something they've picked up since they've arrived. But generally, those ones that die soon after arrival is from the stress of traveling, and they're carrying that subclinical infection, which now becomes a fully blown infection. So what we try and do is we try and reduce the stress as much as possible. And some of the things that are stress on the agents when they're shipped, to try and give us as much of the paperwork and what have you in advance, so we can pre-clear. Because it doesn't matter how careful we are, we go and we try and clear, and the guys are slow, and if nothing's been done beforehand, the whole procedure can take maybe 5 or 6 hours, and it's hot when they come, and the birds you can't have access to them, they're sitting in a warehouse. So if we can pre-clear, the birds arrive, it's a matter of just quick check, and they clear them and they're out, they can go to quarantine. Then we can give them water and look after them from then. But if they've got an extra few hours unnecessarily without facilities and water and feed and what have you, they have a bad start. So that's something we're stressing on our guys. If we pre-clear, we need the documentation in advance.
Do you have any problems with young bird sickness? That's quite a big problem in Europe.
I think everybody has a problem with young bird sickness. Young bird sickness is generally a term for everything.
Yes.
And young birds are more susceptible to everything, particularly viruses, virus infections. But if the birds are vaccinated well and properly, with proper vaccine in time, you will have a much greatly reduced challenge.
Yeah.
Quite often birds are not vaccinated, or they're vaccinated with time expired vaccine, or vaccine that the cold chain has been broken, and they're off to have very bad starts.
Yeah.
So it's important, and the most important vaccine, of course, is paramyxovirus. There's a whole heap of other vaccines. The effectiveness, who knows? I haven't seen any literature to say whether the vaccine for circovirus or adenovirus actually works.
Our pigeon vet at home, he mainly specialises in poultry, and he said all vaccine, the top rate is 65% effectiveness.
Yeah.
And they consider that to be a very good rate of protection.
Well,
so that means 35%.
What happens if you vaccinate once, you're going to get a certain amount of cover. But if you give them a booster vaccine within, say, 6 weeks, it's going to help.
Yeah.
So what we always recommend is that the breeder vaccinates their birds before weaning. 21 to 24 days old, they need to be vaccinated in the nest. Before they're stressed with the weaning and that trying to find food and water, they should be vaccinated at a young age. And 21 days is a good time. When they get weaned, they're more able to face other challenges. But those birds, if they're vaccinated at that point in time, they should be vaccinated by the shipper when he receives them, and he has them for 3 or 4 weeks. Vaccinate again, and then we vaccinate again, because we don't know whether they've been vaccinated or not anyway. And you can't really overdo it. Some people say you can vaccinate too many times. I think the only time it's a problem is if you actually cause damage to the pigeon because you put the needle in the wrong place. But it shouldn't really be a problem. And some people's opinions would differ to what I have to say. But I know a really reputable vet in Europe who treats paramyxovirus by vaccinating the birds every second day for a week, a full dose. And he says that it stimulates an immune response, not necessarily for paramyxa, but it gets the whole system going, and it is more able to fight that virus.
Like letting your children eat dirt. Stimulates everything. If your children get and play in the dirt, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But you know, you've got other things like salmonella. People underplay salmonella. It's not a virus, but you can vaccinate against salmonella. But there's different schools of thought as to whether the vaccine is effective or not. I don't know. But, you know, it is available. And rotavirus is the one which is going to take the world by storm, I can tell you. And I mean, it started in Australia, and it wiped them out because they had no
the
exposure.
symptoms they have in Australia with the rotavirus, when we were chatting with some Australians, is exactly the same. We've had young bird sickness for about 30 years, but the last couple, and in the beginning we lost, you could say, a third of our birds. Then every year thereafter, without any treatment, we just let them get on with it because it is a virus.
We never had any vaccine, no.
No, and every year we would lose less and less and less. And then a couple of years back,
Boom.
a different virus came along. And again, within 24 hours, the birds would be trembling on the perch, overheating, and then the next morning they were dead. And so it's a different strain.
Well, there's so many different things that come along, and the birds need to learn to build up some kind of resistance. Everybody should be an expert with viruses, with the coronavirus that's been around. And people talk about herd immunity. I mean, we know all about it. The birds come in, they get sick for a while, and within 2 or 3 months.
We're going to the Three Monkeys, so
Okay.
thank you for
Enjoy
the
it.
tour.
All right, no problem.
Dragging us away.
No problem. Yeah, so now I'll carry on talking to you, Frank. But the virus challenge that we face, everyone has the same problem, and it's probably the biggest issue you would have in any loft. But it can be managed provided the birds are vaccinated properly, and by whatever the vet's recommendations. I mean, we can have our recommendation, but we're not vets. But we know from practical experience what to do. So it's a matter of vaccinating properly, giving them the boosters, and if that bird is well fed and it's healthy from a young age, it should have a far better immune system than any bird that's had a challenge, you know. And shipping is a huge stress on a pigeon, huge stress. Lack of water, new environment, coming from a cold climate into the heat. All of that is a challenge for the birds. So the real strong birds can sort of shake it off, you know, but a lot of them can't. So anyway, I don't know.
Well, thank you. That was super.